Hi there, and welcome to the ECM Podcast. I'm Friedrich Kunzmann, and I'm excited to be hosting this newest episode of the podcast and take you behind the scenes of new music on ECM Records. Today I'm joined by the great Norwegian musicians Nils Økland and Sigbjørn Apeland, whose second duo recording for ECM, called Glimmer, showcases their special musical chemistry in a trans-idiomatic context. On the album, the violinist and harmonium player equally draw from traditional folk songs, as well as contemporary music. Much of the album was inspired by the works of the Norwegian painter of the Romantic period, Lars Hertevig. A work of his graces the cover of the album. Nils and Sigbjorn talk about the inspirations behind the music on the album, and how much of it is actually improvised in the moment. They explain how their free jazz influences play into the music, and delve into the mechanics of their respective instruments. Hi there, Nils and Sigbjorn. Thanks so much for joining me in the podcast.
Hello. It's nice that you want to make this podcast.
Yeah. And I'm really excited to dig into the details of this new album of yours, Glimmer. I want to start off by talking about your musical partnership of over 30 years now. This is not the first time, of course, that the two of you have collaborated on ECM either. You released the duo album Liaison in 2011, which was quite the intense homage to violinist-composer Ole Bull. And like on that record, on this new one, you draw from contemporary music, Norwegian folk music, in addition to music that's inspired by painter Lars Hertevig. There's also a piece inspired by the Norwegian composer Fartein Valen, who lived in the first half of the 20th century. How did you two first find together, and what is it that you found in each other's voices that makes you want to further pursue your common ground?
We have been collaborating for many years, as you say, in very different musical constellations. We have not only played as a duo, but also collaborated with other musicians, many singers, and also with the improvising musicians. But I think what we like about playing together is that we both have the ability to switch between genres and working methods.
Absolutely.
Don't know if you agree about that, Nils, but
Yes. And I think it started that Sigbjørn was organ player outside Haugesund and Øren, and you invited me to join a project, local music.
Yeah, that's true. I worked as an organist in a church there and arranged concerts. And I got the idea to invite Nils to perform some local traditional music together with a singer that time. And after that, we have continued in many different ways.
And like you just said, you both work between the most different idioms. You know, you're always crossing some kind of boundaries, it seems, musically, and you never stay fixed within one genre or one language. And what is that process like to go so deep into a territory that kind of combines all of these, you know, between improvisation, composition, Norwegian folk, but also maybe something more classical, contemporary? Is the process like a very open one? That's what I would assume, that you just it comes naturally, basically.
Well, it feels naturally, but it is a cultural thing. It's something we have learned and worked with for many years. But now it has become embodied in a way which sometimes makes us use the word natural. But it's also a matter of hard work and research into different kinds of music and ways of improvising, composing.
Yeah.
So, but it's really embodied over the years.
In your education, then probably too, from where you came. I mean, you're organ educated with church music, Sigbjorn.
Yeah, that's true. It started. My first education was as a classical trained church organist, but later I have been educated within musicology. And today I also work at the University of Bergen with the musicology, and also take care of the folk music archive there.
Yeah. So like an ethnomusicologist a bit.
Exactly.
Your work, yeah.
But I remember one of the first time I heard you play Sigbjørn, I think you studied the John Stevens. You went to London to have lessons with him.
Yes, I did. So it's a bit special, both being a classical organist and having private lessons with a free jazz drummer. But I always like to research or find out of new things, new kinds of music.
It's interesting also how you can concentrate all of those inspirations, all of that background into something so minimal and lyrical, and it's not at all nervous music what you guys present on Glimmer. It's very concentrated, it's very lyrical, it's very soothing and beautiful. And you could think that you'd want to show all of those inspirations at once, but no, it's always very much in the moment, very concentrated.
Yeah, but I remember we have a small festival in Haugesund called the Spontaneous Festival, and I think that's one of the first time I heard you. And I think you play electric piano and quite hectic. And the next time I heard from you was you invite me to play this. And the tunes that Sigbjørn had collected was always so short, and we had a very nice singer called Redwood Holberg who know the dialect from this area, and then we had to continue with something. So then we always had to improvise and to make the songs longer.
Yeah,
and to function on the concept.
Interesting.
Nils, you mentioned the Spontanfestivalen, which doesn't exist any longer, but it was an annual event for some years, and you were actually the inventor of this. And one of the interesting thing about this festival was that you invited all kinds of musicians and other artists to perform and collaborate in your hometown, Haugesund. And I'm a little bit younger than you, and for young musicians, it was really inspiring to experience all this and all these strange events and unexpected meetings between different kinds of musicians and artists. So that has really been important, not only for me, but for many musicians coming from that area.
I think it was also for me important, and there was several people. It was, for example, the improviser and composer and painter Arvid Gangse. He was very important. Then we have the poet Corbin Falkeid and the artist Ivar Ruud. We have it was this small festival. We decided anything ourselves, and we got some help from the local culture office and to organize. But
and it's also transdisciplinary. It's not just musical. You saying there's also a poet there. It's like a big arts festival then.
Yes, we have and we invited people to do something that they had would like to do, to check out. So we asked people to do 20-minute sets. And for example, I remember very much it was some very good modern dancers, young dancers. They have a project that they improvise, and I think they suddenly show up in this small island in Haugesund, and it was a tuba player, Elisabeth Bannebo, who was there, and they made a small dance and music spontaneously, and it was really good. One of the best performances.
And so that's kind of the context which you guys met in, which is a very natural context for the two of you in a way.
Yes. And we also have Arvid Gangse. He was in contact with the St. Finnerud Trio, and I think St. Finnerud Trio had their second concert in 10 years on this festival. So we also invite people that we really admire and heard so much lately. So it was nice. But as you said, this was kind of a context. And when Sigbjørn worked as organ player, just 1 hour drive from here, and this maybe early 1990 or
early 90s.
Yeah. I just want to mention that I think we played in 1982 trio for 11 years and improvised a lot three together. And I think also maybe in a way influenced this recording, even if we in this recording play mostly folk melodies and improvise.
I'm proud of those records. I think it's good music. And the idea was kind of came from the drummer, Eivind Skarbe. Yeah, the three of us play on all these records, and on some of them there are guest musicians also. What is special about it is that all of the music is completely improvised, but it's kind of a disciplined way. So very often it does not sound like free jazz with all these energy explosions and stuff like that. So, but it is all everything is improvised.
Everything is improvised, meaning that you don't even have a melodic line that is pre-composed.
No.
Okay.
Nothing at all.
But I struggle to have gigs in pre-improvised music clubs and such things because it didn't sound like pre-improvised music should.
Are there pieces on this record that are the same? They're completely improvised without framework on Glimmer?
I think so.
Yeah, for example, this Rullestad Juve is like that.
And how does that begin? How does a conversation that you two as a duo improvise begin? How do you go about it?
It depends on the context and the situation and the way the music should be used. If it is music for a film or a theater piece or something like that, of course there are much more limitation because then there is a specific action or a specific mood that is important. Then you have to relate to that. But when we play concerts or when we record, we may just stop play without having anything at all planned before.
You both utilize quite characteristic and particular instruments, which makes also for something very intriguing. Nils, the Hardanger fiddle is considered the national instrument of Norway, as far as I've understood. Contrary to the violin, it's equipped with 8 or 9 strings.
It's sometimes 8, sometimes 9.
Sometimes 8, sometimes 9. When did you first come about the instrument? Is that something that you kind of grow up with in certain contexts in Norway?
No, I played violin, and I met some, but it was Academy or the Bull Academy where we both worked, and I met Knut Hamre and Sigbjørn Bernhard Osa, and also a painter, Ludvig Eikås. He was very important for me because he thought it was a scandal that the students of Norwegian Academy didn't play Hardanger fiddle and didn't know. So he didn't give us fiddles, but he loaned us fiddles, and I bought my first Hardanger fiddle from him.
Yeah. For those that don't have no idea what it looks like, it looks very ornamental compared to a typical violin, right? It has like little ornaments.
Yes, I think this is the old international tradition that, for example, also Stradivarius. He also made some decoration, and but it went to, especially after Norway was a free country, we have to find some typical Norwegian things, and for quite simple decoration, it was developed to be more kind of national instrument like it is today.
So discovering that instrument more, what are the qualities in that fiddle that are really intriguing to you as compared to just playing violin? I mean, of course, you have a larger register, I would assume.
I'm not sure how to explain, but I found out that it has a special sound, and in that years I was really interested into. I played a lot of gypsy music and folk music from whole Balkan.
Yeah.
But when I started playing this fiddle, I understand that we have a rich tradition in Norway, but I didn't know. And I also have a grandfather, or a great-grandfather, that composed harmonium tune and was an important player.
Okay.
But I didn't know this music, so I started to visit different fiddlers and learn. And for example, going in Rullestad, I think I use a fiddle that tune called dark blue tuning. That's mostly D's. It's D on the top and A and D and D. Gives a darker sound. It's a violin or a tune like that. So I often use that, but I tune my fiddles so it changes the atmosphere.
I think that's an important thing about the Hardanger fiddle, that in traditional music for the fiddle, it is tuned different ways for different melodies, but Nils develops this and makes his own tuning sometimes and experiment with this. So that's really one of the interesting possibilities with that.
But this way of tuning, I learned from a fiddler in Gudbrandsdalen. His name was Hans Prini, and he called this dark blue tuning.
Dark blue tuning?
Yeah.
Cool.
And it's he said it's a few traditional dance tunes on this way of tuning, but he said it's very few, so you have to make some new, he said. So I made some solo things that I also used in the Monograph album. But here I only used it because we want a dark atmosphere. And then
okay. Does it only? I assume it doesn't only alter the timbre of your instrument and the tonal qualities, but it also alter. You have to the figurations that you use, the fingering, is different. So does it make it easier for certain chordal voicings to be played on it, or is it really just the timbre?
Just that it changed the atmosphere in the other instruments. And it's a very old technique that comes from viola da gambas.
Yeah.
And rock guitars and such in old times.
Okay.
And it's been used by especially the composers before Bach, like Heinrich Stieber and Smeltzer. They use this technique.
Yeah. In the clarinet world, they call it scordatura.
Yeah, scordatura.
No, I also heard that some of it were old players that when they change the tune of instrument, they still often use the same fingering, and then you can get really strange melodic phrases. Some of the old tunes, it's really. So I sometimes also do this.
And Sigbjørn, you have like we said, a broad education as a church musician with a natural emphasis on the organ. What made you pick up the harmonium?
Well, I grew up with it. We had a harmonium in our home when I was a child, and that was quite common that people had those instruments in their homes. They were also used in schools and small chapels and other places where people met. And many people have considered it as a kind of low budget or a substitute instrument for the pipe organ.
Yeah.
But actually it's more related to the accordion. It's small metal reeds inside that make the sound. And even the harmonica is relative.
Yeah, and you can hear that in the sound of it. There's something a lot more wooden about the sound.
Yeah. And there are some interesting dynamic possibilities that other instruments don't have in the same way. Yeah, maybe the accordion. But when you pedal, you pump air into the bellow, and you can adjust how much air you use. And there are also some, at your knees, there are some smaller wooden pieces that you can work as a crescendo.
So the volume, you can, enhance the volume.
Both the volume and the sound, how many registers you activate. You can do these things with your feet while you're playing.
So you make it louder, plus you widen the spectrum of registers. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. And also, and I feel like both of those instruments, the hardanger fiddle and the harmonium, there's something about the attack that you always that you hear that is more palpable. You hear the keystrokes of the harmonium very, very nicely on the album, and they add a percussive layer that also plays into the music and into your interplay. And the same goes for the attack on the fiddle with your bow. Those events are very important to the music and to the way that you guys speak to each other in the music.
I'm happy that you remarked this, because with the harmonium there are always some sounds that musicians normally don't want to be there, like percussive sounds and all kinds of sounds that are not made from the reeds but other parts of the instrument.
Yeah,
and that normally people try to minimize these sounds, but instead I try to use this as an extension of the instrument.
Absolutely. And I feel that it creates something more intimate, because when you're a musician, you're sitting at the instrument, you always hear those things happening. That it's part of making music, be it on the guitar, even electric guitar. There's the amp, but you hear the strings, right, that you're playing right under your guitar. Same for you're right by the fiddle, right by the violin. You hear all of that happening, so you're closer as an audience or as someone listening to that album to what's happening with the instrument.
I also want to say something about, I think the harmonium is a very advanced instrument that you can make crescendos and decrescendos that you, for example, cannot do on the piano. It's sometimes to play together with a string orchestra or something.
There's something really dynamic about that, yeah.
Yeah, and so sometimes when I'm playing more conventional music, like pop music and stuff like that in the studio, I very often use the harmonium like you would use a string synthesizer or something like that. You can use it in similar ways, but harmonium is a little bit more dynamic in a way.
Yeah.
I must also say that I play also a lot of violin on the record, so
of course,
or less half and half.
Half and half, yeah. And talking about the record, the repertoire. You, Sigbjorn, you collected pieces from local singers in Western Norway, a couple of which figure on this recording, in maybe in variants, because you also improvised, both the two of you. Can you talk about the origin of these folk tunes?
Yeah, it's a mix of old things that we have found in archives, both written manuscripts and sound recordings from the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah.
And some of it I have collected myself, because that has been a part of my job at the Folk Music Archive, to interview and record people. So it's a mix of quite old transcriptions from around 1900 onwards.
And in the liner notes, you guys mention that you love to improvise on that folk music. Let's talk about that, the factor of improvisation in your music, because it is very, of course, it has nothing to do with improvisation in typical, 60s jazz or whatever, post-bop. It's something very different. It's folk improvisation. How big is the improvised part as compared to the composed part?
It's different from piece to piece, I will say, because sometimes we play the tunes as they were written or sung without adding very much to it, and sometimes we just use it as a kind of idea, point of departure, and have a very extremely free approach to it. And some of the other music that we play that is not based on traditional tunes, sometimes completely improvised as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we have a lot of artistic luggage or inspiration from, for example, free jazz from the 60s and 70s. Even if you can't hear it, obviously,
okay,
it's a part of our approach to music still.
It's definitely not something obvious that sticks out, I have to admit.
No.
You wouldn't think about that in this context.
I have also a comment there that when you ask me why I stopped playing hardanger fiddle, I admire very much the saxophone player Carl Neumann, same generation as Strabarik. I always listen to this, and I asked him to get some lessons. It wasn't so easy, but I met Kalle and Bjørnar Andresen, the bass player in Finnerud Trio, in the park in Oslo. and Bjørnar was easier to get lessons in. And when I improvised with him, he said that it sounds much more personal when I play hardanger fiddle. He said that when you play violin, it sounds like a mixture of Capelli and Stuff Smith or something. But when I play hardanger fiddle with lots of open strings, and that was much more interesting.
Yeah.
And he even made a LP with his compositions, mainly solid 68 copies. But that was really just for the influence. When we took this influences Sigbjørn from me, that was really important for me.
That's a really interesting context for this record, I feel, to know that's also in there and in your approach to what you do. Because my question I asked as if it was obvious that it's not in there, but that's not the case. Yeah.
I just want to mention that I tried to learn to play standard jazz, but I wasn't very good on that. But I really admire these three people.
Yeah. Another part of your repertoire on this record is based on or inspired by the painter Lars Hertevik. You composed music for a film about him, and some of the music is inspired by his paintings. I assume you were very aware of his work before you approached the film project.
I think he's really one of the most famous Norwegian painters. He lived from 1830 to 1902. He was educated in Düsseldorf and was a landscape painter.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a romantic painter, but maybe a little bit more mysterious and obscure. That might have a connection to him suffering from mental diseases most of his life. And he died as a very, very poor man. And his paintings got famous after his death. But Hertevik also grew up in the same area that we come from. And of course, it was very inspiring for us to know that such great artists could come from these small rural places. It's been an important inspiration for me, at least, or most of my life, I would say.
And how did you go about composing music for the film? Was it music that was developing anyways, and you just used it for the film, or is it something that you that is really closely related to the paintings of his?
It's a long story. I think you know most about that, Nils. It started with this theater project.
Yeah, it was a theater project called Melancholia, and that was made by a small theater here in Haugesund, and Sverre Våge, who was there, and he collaborated the Stavanger Theater and Oslo theaters. And we was asked to make the music, and that was about 2000, I think. And when this film was made, they have used some of this music because we record some of this music on our album called Please.
Mm-hmm.
And then they asked us to make new music for the film.
Yeah.
And I remember it was two different directors, and I remember I quarreled to have much as possible of a new music in the film. But in the end, editing, they have also used a lot of old music. So this was a long process for where they first make music to the theater piece, and it was based on Jon Fosse's novels about Lars Hertevik.
Okay.
And after that, it was still, yeah.
And as we mentioned earlier, you also included a piece that you wrote for the composer Fartein Wallen, or with him in mind. He was the first Norwegian composer, you mentioned this also in the liner notes, to deal with atonal music. Mm-hmm. And accordingly, the piece takes a sidestep from the otherwise very lyrical material on the album and explores very subtle dissonant knots constructed around a 12-tone series, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, that's right. It is 12-tone melody that I made, but we use it in a quite free way. So we play it forward and backwards and mirror and use these techniques, but we have a completely free approach to it. We have not agreed how we should solve it in each performance. So
Yeah.
it'll be different for each performance.
So first you introduce it, but then you kind of go away from it, or you just do your thing.
We do, and we are kind of traditionalist in the way that we use this free polyphonic style that these early 12-tone composers also used. But we our approach is more like the way we play a standard tune or a chill jam or a Volkslied or anything like that.
And how do you guys go about? I mean, improvising. I think I would say that the harmonium is mainly responsible for the harmonic backdrop at times, and then you're the melodic, the melodic lead on violin, Nils. Of course, that's not true all the time, and there's variation, and of course the harmonium plays a lot of melodic parts too. But improvising. Do you improvise a lot of harmony too? As in, do you really take complete sidesteps, or is the harmonic framework mainly given and you keep to it, Sigbjørn?
Yeah, we do different techniques on different tunes. But when you're talking about the harmonic thing, I would like to mention that when Nils play the harmonium fiddle, this instrument is different from the violin. Since that the bridge is more flattened, it's not as bowed as on the violin, and that makes it easier to play on several strings at the same time.
So you have double stop and stuff like that. More,
exactly. And when you do things like that on the fiddle, that's an important harmonic element.
For sure, true.
I don't know if you agree about that, Nils, but I think it's a lot.
I would say that it's interesting. And I also think I have a comment to this Harten-Valen-inspired piece by you, that he made different versions of it, both on violin and Hardanger fiddle. And I think Improvisation ended up with using the Hardanger fiddle.
Yeah.
And that was quite different atmosphere. I think when I play violin, it was more like classical chamber music. But I think on this version that's on record, it was more, as you, Sigbjørn said, more open-minded and linked to the other type of repertoire that he used on the record.
I just want to mention that the cover, the album cover.
Yeah.
And I must say personally, I'm really happy that ECM still publish physical versions. Yeah, great. And there will be a vinyl later. But the cover painting here at that album is made by Lars Hertovik. That's a sketch. As I said, he was a very poor man, and sometimes he couldn't afford a real canvas or paper for his work. So he was drawing and painting on tobacco paper and these labels from canned sardine boxes and stuff like that. And sometimes you can see this through the painting, this stamps from this tobacco paper.
So on this cover, maybe even the writing it's not part of the artwork. It was just there. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe.
You can't be sure.
I don't know the details exactly about that one. No, nobody can be really sure, but
I've never seen it before. I've seen a lot of Hertovik's production, but not. Maybe it's from one of his sketch books. I don't know.
But this was also kind of recommendation of for the listeners to buy the physical thing, the album, because I think it's a value in itself. These physical publications. And personally, I would also like to add that as a young music enthusiast, the ECM records were so inspiring. So when I was a young man, I bought all the ECM records that I could find in the surf because I knew they were always good and the covers were always good. So they were valuable.
Nils Økland and Sigbjørn Apeland on their new recording, Glimmer. Thank you for joining me in the ECM Podcast. I'm Friedrich Kunzmann, and I look forward to present more new music from ECM very soon.